The Dollar General on Bull Street sits in what used to be Whitman's General Store, which served Savannah families from 1847 until it burned down during Sherman's march to the sea, taking the owner and his 3 young daughters with it. The city rebuilt on the same foundation after the war, but locals say you can still smell smoke on humid nights when the Spanish moss hangs heavy in the air. What the corporate office doesn't know is that our cash register sometimes rings up purchases from 1864. Items like cornmeal 12 cents and lamp oil 8 cents, even when the store is completely empty. The receipts print out in faded ink that crumbles to dust by morning, and the drawer opens to reveal coins that disappeared from circulation before my great-grandfather was born. My name's Brandon Telfair, and I've been working nights here for 8 months now. The previous guard, Jimmy Caldwell, quit after what he called the incident with the little girl in aisle 3. Nobody talks about what happened to Jimmy, but I know he moved back to his mama's place in Brunswick and won't set foot in Savannah anymore. The manager, Mrs. Beauregard, just told me to keep the lights on and call if anything unusual happened. She handed me a folded piece of paper with 6 handwritten rules, her fingers shaking as she pressed it into my palm. Before this job, I was pulling doubles at the Waffle House on Montgomery Street, trying to scrape together enough money to get my own place. My girlfriend Keisha had been staying at her cousin's apartment in Ardsley Park since her landlord kicked her out, and we were both getting desperate. When I saw the posting for night security at Dollar General, $12 an hour, which was 3 more than I was making, I didn't ask questions about why they needed someone so badly. I should have asked questions. The first night was quiet enough. I walked the aisles every hour like the rules said, checked the locks, made sure the coolers were humming. But around 3 in the morning, I heard what sounded like a child laughing near the candy section. When I investigated, all I found was a packet of Charleston chews torn open, the wrapper folded into the shape of a paper boat. The security camera showed nothing but empty shelves and that sickly green glow from the emergency exit sign. 3 weeks in, I started seeing the burns. They appeared on my forearms first, small circular marks that looked like someone had pressed cigarettes into my skin while I slept. Keisha noticed them when I came home that morning, her eyes wide with concern. "Brandon, baby, what happened to you?" But I didn't remember getting hurt. The marks didn't sting or itch. They just sat there on my skin like tiny branded reminders of something I couldn't recall. Now, sitting in my Honda Accord in the parking lot at 11:47 p.m., staring at those fluorescent lights bleeding through the front windows, I know things are about to get worse. The paper with the rules feels hot in my jacket pocket, and I can smell smoke drifting in through my air vents even though there's no fire anywhere in sight. I have to go inside. My shift starts in 13 minutes. The key turns with a grinding sound that reminds me of old cemetery gates. Mrs. Beauregard insisted I use the original brass key instead of the electronic fob. Something about maintaining the connection, though she never explained what that meant. The door swings open with a groan, and I step into the familiar smell of floor wax and something else. Something sweet and burnt, like molasses left too long on a stove. I flip the light switches near the entrance, watching the overhead bulbs flicker to life one by one. The store stretches before me in that eerie yellow glow, shelves packed with everything from Vienna sausages to birthday cards. My footsteps echo against the linoleum as I walk toward the counter where Mrs. Beauregard left my clipboard and the thermos of coffee she brings every night. The paper with the rules sits folded beside the register. I've read them dozens of times, but they still make my stomach twist. Rule 1. Check aisle 7 first, always. If you hear voices coming from the health and beauty section, do not investigate. Continue your rounds as normal. Rule 2. The register will ring up phantom purchases between 2:30 and 3:15 a.m. Let it finish its transaction, then clear the screen manually. Never look at the receipt until morning. Rule 3. If a customer enters wearing period clothing from the 1800s, serve them normally, but do not make eye contact. Accept any form of payment they offer. Rule 4. The storage room door must remain locked after midnight. If you hear knocking from inside, turn the radio to AM 1450 and wait for the knocking to stop. Rule 5. When walking past the candy aisle, whistle or hum continuously. The silence attracts them. Rule 6. If the lights begin dimming throughout the store, go to the break room immediately and wait. Do not come out until they return to full brightness. I fold the paper and slide it into my back pocket, then grab my flashlight from the charging station. The beam cuts through the shadows between the shelves, and I start my first walkthrough of the night. My sneakers squeak against the floor with each step, the sound bouncing off the walls in a rhythm that almost sounds like breathing. Aisle 1. Canned goods. Everything lined up in perfect rows. Aisle 2. Cereals and breakfast items. Boxes standing at attention like cardboard soldiers. Aisle 3. Household cleaners. The chemical smells sharp enough to make my eyes water. I pause here, remembering what Mrs. Beauregard said about Jimmy and the incident. Whatever happened to him started somewhere in these aisles. Aisle 4, pet supplies. The bags of dog food cast long shadows across the floor, and I catch myself checking each corner with the flashlight. Nothing there except dust and a few scattered kibble pieces that must have fallen from a torn bag. Aisle 5, paper products and trash bags. The toilet paper towers reach almost to the ceiling, white and pristine in my light beam. I move faster here, something about the height of those stacks making me feel exposed. Aisle 6, laundry detergent and cleaning supplies. The bottles reflect my flashlight back at me like dozens of watching eyes. I blink and look away, focusing on the end of the aisle where it opens into the main walkway. Then, aisle 7. The health and beauty section feels different from the others. Colder maybe, or just more still. The shelves here hold shampoo bottles, toothpaste tubes, and feminine products, all arranged in neat rows like every other aisle. But something about the way the shadows fall makes the whole section feel wrong, like it's waiting for something. If you like the stories, please hype the videos from a button like this just above the comment section. It helps the videos to get more reach and perform well. It would take just a few seconds and cost nothing, but would help the channel grow even faster. Thank you. I listen carefully for voices as I approach. Mrs. Beauregard never explained what kind of voices or who might be speaking, but I strain my ears anyway. The only sounds are the buildings settling around me and the distant hum of the coolers near the back wall. My flashlight beam sweeps across the shampoo bottles, catching the corporate logos and price tags. Everything looks normal. I check my watch. 12:23 a.m. Still early in my shift, but already I can feel that familiar weight in my chest, like someone sitting on my lungs. I finish checking the remaining aisles and make my way back to the counter. The coffee Mrs. Beauregard left tastes like it was brewed with creek water, bitter and thick, but the warmth helps settle my nerves. I settle into the folding chair behind the register and open the paperback novel I brought. Something about pirates in the Caribbean that Keisha picked up from a yard sale. But I can't focus on the words. My eyes keep drifting to the security monitor, watching the grainy black and white feeds from each aisle. Everything looks peaceful, ordinary even. Just rows of products waiting for customers who won't arrive until morning. At 12:47 a.m., the register drawer opens by itself with a mechanical ding that makes me jump. I stare at the open cash drawer for a full minute, waiting for it to slide shut on its own. When it doesn't move, I reach out with one finger and push it closed. The mechanism clicks into place with that same mechanical din, and I return to my book, though the words might as well be written in a foreign language now. The coffee grows cold in my hands as I watch the security monitors. Every few minutes I catch movement in my peripheral vision, just quick flashes that could be shadows shifting when the building settles. But when I look directly at the screens, everything stays still. Aisles 1 through 8 stretch empty under those yellow lights, product displays standing in neat formation, like they're waiting for inspection. At 1:15 a.m., I start my second walkthrough. This time I notice things I missed during the first round. In aisle 3, one bottle of Pine Sol sits turned backward, its label facing the wrong direction. I flip it around to match the others, then check the rest of the shelf. Everything else looks normal. In aisle 5, a package of paper towels has slipped from its stack and lies on the floor. I pick it up and slide it back into place, wondering if the building's settling could have caused it to fall. But when I reach aisle 7 again, my steps slow. The shampoo bottles I swept with my flashlight earlier have rearranged themselves. Not drastically, just enough to notice if you're looking carefully. 3 bottles of Head & Shoulders now sit at the front of the shelf instead of the back, and a bottle of kids' shampoo with cartoon characters on the label has moved 2 spaces to the left. The changes are subtle, deliberate, like someone wanted me to notice without making it obvious. I remember Rule 1 about not investigating voices in the health and beauty section. But I don't hear any voices. Just that same stillness that makes the air feel thicker than it should. I continue my rounds, finishing aisles 8 through 12 without incident. The frozen food section hums quietly behind its glass doors. Packages of TV dinners and ice cream stacked in orderly rows. Near the back wall, cases of beer and soda stand in their metal racks, waiting for customers who won't arrive for hours. Back at the counter, I try to focus on my book again, but my eyes keep wandering to the clock. 1:43 a.m. Still almost an hour before the phantom purchases start, according to Rule 2. I flip through the pages without reading them, using the motion to keep my hands busy while I listen for any sounds from the aisles. At 2:15 a.m., the temperature drops. It happens gradually at first, just a coolness that creeps up my arms and settles in my chest. Then it becomes noticeable enough that I check the thermostat near the pharmacy counter. Still set to 72 degrees, same as always. But my breath starts forming small clouds when I exhale, and I zip up my hoodie to trap what warmth I can. The lights dim slightly, not enough to trigger Rule 6 about going to the break room, but enough to make the shadows between the shelves grow deeper. I grab my flashlight and click it on, the beam cutting through the growing darkness with reassuring brightness. That's when I hear the first footsteps. They come from somewhere near the back of the store, soft and measured, like someone walking carefully to avoid making noise. I check the security monitors, scanning each camera feed for movement. But the screens show empty aisles. The footsteps continue, step, pause, step, pause, moving from the rear of the store toward the front. My hand finds the folded paper in my pocket, fingers tracing the edges while I try to remember if any of the rules mentioned what to do about footsteps. Rule 1 says not to investigate voices in aisle 7. Rule 5 mentions something about silence attracting then in the candy aisle, but nothing about footsteps from unknown locations. The sounds grow closer. Now they seem to be coming from aisle 4 or 5, still moving toward the front of the store. I strain to see any movement on the monitors, but the camera angles don't cover every corner, and the dimmed lights create blind spots where someone, or something, could move without being seen. At 2:28 a.m., the footsteps stop. 2 minutes before the phantom purchases begin. I check my watch again, then look at the register. The screen glows its usual blue-white, showing the Dollar General logo, and ready for next customer message. My palms sweat despite the cold air, and I wipe them on my jeans while keeping my eyes fixed on the monitor screens. 2:30 a.m. arrives with a soft electronic chime. The register screen flickers once, then displays a new message. Sale in progress. The keys begin pressing themselves, each button making a tiny click as phantom fingers work through a transaction I cannot see. Numbers appear on the display. Item codes I don't recognize, followed by prices that seem too low for modern merchandise. The receipt printer whirs to life, feeding paper through its mechanism while printing line after line of text. I want to look, to see what items are being purchased by customers who existed over a century ago. But Rule 2 specifically warns against reading the receipt until morning. So I sit in my chair and watch the register work through its ghostly sale, the mechanical sounds echoing in the cold air. The transaction takes nearly 20 minutes. Item after item appears on the screen. Cornmeal, lamp oil, bolts of cotton fabric, jars of molasses, each one accompanied by prices in cents rather than dollars. The final total comes to $3.47, which seems absurdly high for 1864, but laughably low by today's standards. The cash drawer slides open with that familiar ding, but this time coins actually dropped into the till. I hear them hit the metal compartments with tiny metallic clinks, though I can't see what's placing them there. Old coins probably, like Mrs. Beauregard mentioned, the kind that stopped circulating when my great-grandfather was still learning to walk. At 2:51 a.m., the transaction completes itself. The receipt printer stops its whirring, the screen returns to ready for next customer, and the cash drawer slides shut. The printed receipt sits curled in the output tray, but I don't reach for it. Instead, I sit back in my folding chair and wait for my heart rate to return to normal. The temperature begins to rise again, and the lights brighten back to their usual yellow glow. Whatever presence had filled the store during those 21 minutes gradually fades, leaving behind only the familiar smell of floor wax and that underlying scent of smoke and molasses. I check my watch. 2:53 a.m. Still over 3 hours left in my shift. At 3:17 a.m., I force myself to start the third walkthrough of my shift. The phantom purchase finished 16 minutes ago, but I can still feel the residual coldness clinging to my skin like morning fog off the Savannah River. The receipt sits untouched in the printer tray, curled and waiting for sunrise when I'm finally allowed to read what the ghosts of Bull Street bought tonight. I grab my flashlight and head toward aisle 1, but something makes me pause near the entrance. The air tastes different now, heavier, with a metallic edge that reminds me of the snow before thunderstorms. My grandmother used to say she could taste lightning hours before it struck, and standing here in this yellow-lit store, I think I understand what she meant. The first 6 aisles pass without incident, though I notice more small changes from my previous walks. A box of crackers turned sideways in aisle 2. 3 cans of green beans grouped together when they were scattered before. Nothing dramatic enough to panic about, but consistent enough to prove something is rearranging the merchandise while I'm not looking. When I reach aisle 7, the shampoo bottles have moved again. This time, they've formed a rough line across the shelf, all facing the same direction like they're watching something. The kids' shampoo with cartoon characters sits at the front of the group, its bright colors standing out among the adult products. I study the arrangement for several seconds, trying to determine if there's a pattern or message I'm supposed to understand. That's when I notice the silence. Not just quiet, complete. absolute silence. The building's usual sounds have stopped. No humming from the coolers, no electrical buzz from the lights, no settling groans from the old foundation. Even my own breathing seems muffled, like the air itself has thickened to absorb sound. I remember Rule 5 about the candy aisle, and silence attracting them, though I'm not in the candy section yet, still 3 aisles away. But the wrongness of this quiet makes my skin prickle with warnings I can't name, and I start humming the first tune that comes to mind. Georgia on My Mind, something my daddy used to sing while working on his truck. The humming helps, not just psychologically, but physically. The oppressive weight of silence lifts slightly, allowing other sounds to creep back in. The coolers resume their low rumbling, and I can hear my footsteps on the linoleum again. I continue through aisle 8, still humming, then 9 and 10. The frozen food cases reflect my flashlight beam back at me through their glass doors. Packages of fish sticks and ice cream sandwiches lined up like frozen soldiers awaiting orders. Nothing seems out of place here, but I keep the tune going anyway, letting the melody fill the space around me. Aisle 11. Candy and snacks. The moment I step into this section, the silence returns with crushing force. My humming dies in my throat, cut off so abruptly it feels like someone pressed a mute button on the world. The candy bars hang in their metal racks. Snickers, Milky Ways, Charleston Chews. But they seem to vibrate slightly, as though responding to some frequency I can't hear. I try to start humming again, but no sound emerges. My throat works, my tongue moves to form the melody, but the air swallows every note before it can take shape. The silence has become a living thing, pressing against my eardrums and filling my lungs with cotton. That's when I see them. Small shapes moving between the candy racks, darting from shadow to shadow too quickly for my flashlight beam to catch. Not rats. The movement is too purposeful, too coordinated. They seem to be the size of children's hands, scurrying along the shelves and disappearing behind packages of gum and breath mints. I force air through my vocal cords, pushing past whatever is stealing my voice, and manage a weak whistle. Just a few notes, barely audible, but enough to make the scurrying shapes freeze in place. I can't see them directly, but I sense them watching me from their hiding spots among the candy displays. The whistling grows easier with practice. I manage a full verse of "Whistle while you work," ironic given my situation, and the shapes begin to retreat. They move reluctantly, like animals being driven from a food source they don't want to abandon. By the time I finish the song, they vanished completely, leaving only the candy racks swaying slightly in their wake. I hurry through the rest of aisle 11 and move to 12, the final section, before returning to the counter. Here, the pharmacy area sits behind its metal security gate, prescription bottles lined up on shelves like tiny soldiers. Everything looks normal, but I keep whistling anyway, letting the melody bounce off the walls and fill the spaces where silence tries to gather. Back at the counter, I collapse into my folding chair and take a long drink of cold coffee. My throat feels raw from forcing sound past whatever tried to steal my voice, and my hands shake slightly as I set down the cup. The security monitors show empty aisles again, but I know better than to trust the cameras completely. They can't capture everything that moves through this place after midnight. At 3:45 a.m., knocking begins from the storage room. 3 sharp raps, pause, then 3 more. The sound carries clearly through the store, echoing off the walls with hollow authority. I know this sound from Rule 4. Storage room door stays locked. Knocking means turn the radio to AM 1450 and wait. The radio sits on a shelf behind the counter, an old analog model with a telescoping antenna and a dial that's been painted over so many times the numbers are barely visible. I turn it on and spin the dial until I find 1450, but instead of music or talk shows, static fills the air. White noise that sounds like rain on a tin roof, or maybe voices whispering just below the threshold of understanding. The knocking continues, growing more insistent. 3 raps, pause, 3 raps, pause. Whatever is locked in the storage room wants out, and it's getting frustrated with my lack of response. But Rule 4 is clear. I turn on the radio and wait. So I sit in my chair, listening to static while something pounds on the storage room door with increasing urgency. At 4:03 a.m., the knocking stops. The silence that follows feels different from the hungry quiet in the candy aisle. This is peaceful, almost relieved, like whatever was trapped has either given up or found another way to occupy itself. I turn off the radio and lean back in my chair, checking my watch. Still over 2 hours until sunrise, when Mrs. Beauregard will arrive with fresh coffee and that knowing look in her eyes. I pull out my phone to text Keisha, needing some connection to the normal world beyond these walls. But the screen shows no signal bars, even though I had full reception when I arrived. The phone's clock reads 4:03 a.m., but the digits flicker occasionally, sometimes showing 4:19 or 3:47 before snapping back to the correct time. Outside, Bull Street sits empty under the streetlights. Spanish moss hangs from the oak trees like curtains, swaying in a breeze I can't feel through the store's windows. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimes the hour, its bronze voice carrying across the sleeping city. I settle back into my chair and try to read my book, but the words blur together on the page. The events of the night have left me wired and exhausted at the same time, like drinking too much coffee while trying to fall asleep. My eyes drift to the security monitors, watching for movement in the aisles, then to the receipts still curled in the printer tray, waiting for morning light to reveal its secrets. Hi everyone. Before we move forward, I have something exciting to tell you. Many of you asked for stories without the strange rules, so I created a brand new channel just for that. It's called Mr. Grimm Archive. The link is in the description, or you can click the card above. I think you'll really enjoy it. So check it out whenever you want some more exciting types of stories. Also, I hope you're enjoying the 2 uploads a day. Let me know in the comments if you like some stories from your location. Now, let's continue with today's story. At 4:27 a.m., the front door chime rings. I look up from my book, coffee cup halfway to my lips, and stare at the entrance. The electronic door sensor should be disabled after hours. Mrs. Beauregard showed me the switch behind a pharmacy counter on my first night. But the familiar 2-note melody echoes through the store anyway, clear as a bell on Sunday morning. The door stands closed, its glass reflecting the interior lights back at me in wavering patterns. No customer walks through, no late-night emergency shopper hunting for medicine or baby formula. Just that lingering chime hanging in the air like incense in an empty church. I set down my coffee and check the security monitor that covers the front entrance. The camera shows the same empty doorway, the same reflection-covered glass. But something about the image looks wrong, like I'm viewing it through water or old window panes that have warped with age. 30 seconds later, the chime sounds again. This time, I watch the monitor as the door swings open seemingly by itself. No hand pushes it, no body passes through the threshold, but the sensor triggers anyway, and the door closes with its usual pneumatic sigh. The motion detector above the entrance flickers red once, then returns to its steady green glow. I grab my flashlight and walk toward the front of the store, my sneakers squeaking against the linoleum with each careful step. The air near the entrance feels different, cooler, with that same metallic taste I noticed earlier. But now there's something else mixed in. A scent like lavender and old books, sweet but dusty. Standing near the door, I can see Bull Street through the glass. Empty sidewalks stretch in both directions under the street lights, Spanish moss hanging motionless from the oak trees. A few parked cars line the curb, a pickup truck, a sedan, my Honda Accord sitting right where I left it. Everything looks normal from this side of the glass, but when I turn to head back to the counter, I see her. She stands in aisle 3, examining a bottle of dish soap with the careful attention of someone comparing prices. Her dress reaches nearly to the floor. Dark blue fabric with tiny white flowers, the kind of pattern my great-grandmother might have worn to church. Long sleeves cover her arms, despite the warm Savannah night, and her hair is pinned up in an elaborate style I've only seen in old photographs. Rule 3 floods back into my memory. If a customer enters wearing period clothing from the 1800s, serve them normally, but do not make eye contact. Accept any form of payment they offer. My mouth goes dry. She's really here, this woman from another century, shopping for household cleaners like it's the most natural thing in the world. Her movements are slow and precise as she turns the bottle to read its label, though from this distance I can't tell if the words mean anything to her. I walk back to the counter, forcing my steps to maintain their normal rhythm. Can't run, can't stare, can't do anything that might violate the rule. Just treat her like any other customer who happens to be shopping at 4:30 in the morning while wearing clothing that went out of style before the Civil War ended. The register screen still shows, ready for next customer. I take my position behind the counter and wait, keeping my eyes focused on the cash drawer instead of the security monitors. If I watch her shop, I might accidentally make eye contact through the cameras, and I don't know if that counts as breaking the rule or not. She takes her time browsing. I can hear her footsteps moving through the aisles, soft, measured steps that sound different from the phantom footsteps I heard earlier. These have weight to them, the sound of real shoes on real linoleum, but with an odd, muffled quality like she's walking on carpet instead of hard flooring. After what feels like an hour but is probably only 10 minutes, she approaches the counter. I keep my gaze fixed on the register screen, watching her reflection in the monitor's black surface as she places items on the counter. A bottle of dish soap, a bar of soap, and something wrapped in brown paper that crinkles when she sets it down. "Good evening," she says, her voice carrying the refined accent of old Savannah families, the kind you still hear sometimes in the Garden District mansions. "I hope I'm not keeping you from your duties." "Not at all, ma'am," I reply, reaching for the first item without looking up. "Find everything you needed tonight?" "Oh yes, thank you. The selection here is quite remarkable. So many conveniences we never had in my time." My hands shake slightly as I scan the dish soap. The barcode reader beeps, and the price appears on the screen, $2.47. The bar of soap scans normally too, $1.23. But when I reach for the wrapped item, my fingers pass through it like touching smoke. I try again, moving more slowly, but the package remains intangible, even though I can see it sitting on the counter. "That one's for later," she says gently. "Don't worry about it, dear." I nod and total up the 2 items I can actually handle. $3.70, I announce, still keeping my eyes on the register screen. In the reflection, I can see her reaching into a small beaded purse, the kind with a metal clasp that snaps shut. She places coins on the counter. I can hear them clink against the surface, but when I look down directly, I see only empty space. My hand moves toward where the sound came from, and my fingers close around coins that feel real enough. Cold metal, worn smooth, with raised designs I can trace but not identify. "Thank you kindly," she says. "You're doing well with the rules, Brandon." Mrs. Beauregard chose wisely. The fact that she knows my name scares me, but I manage to keep my voice steady. "Have a good evening, ma'am. You all come back and see us." "Oh, I will. We always do." I hear her footsteps retreating toward the door, that same muffled quality making it sound like she's walking through a different store entirely. The door chime rings again, followed by the pneumatic sigh of the entrance closing. When I finally look up, she's gone. The items she purchased are gone too, though I can still feel the weight of those phantom coins in my palm. I open my hand and see 3 silver coins, tarnished with age, and worn so smooth their dates are barely visible. But I can make out 1847 on one of them, and what might be 1851 on another. I drop the coins into the register drawer where they land with soft metallic clicks among the modern quarters and dimes. The drawer slides shut automatically, and the screen returns to ready for next customer. My hands won't stop shaking. I pour another cup of coffee from Mrs. Beauregard's thermos, but the liquid has gone cold and tastes like it was brewed with river water. Still, I drink it anyway, eating something real and normal to ground me after serving a customer who died when my great-great-grandfather was still learning to walk. The clock on the register shows 4:51 a.m. Less than 2 hours until Mrs. Beauregard arrives with the sunrise, but those 2 hours suddenly feel longer than the entire night that's already passed. I settle back into my folding chair and try to focus on my book, but the words swim on the page like they're written in water. Outside, Bull Street remains empty, but now I know that empty doesn't mean alone. At 5:12 a.m., I start what should be my final walkthrough before Mrs. Beauregard arrives. The antique coins from my ghostly customer sit heavy in the register drawer, a tangible reminder that this night has crossed lines I never knew existed. My legs feel stiff from sitting in that folding chair for hours, and the fluorescent lights have started to hurt my eyes with their persistent yellow glare. I grab my flashlight and head toward aisle 1, but something stops me before I take 3 steps from the counter. The air has changed again. Not colder this time, but thicker, like trying to breathe through wet cotton. Each breath requires more effort than it should, and the familiar sounds of the building have shifted into something that doesn't quite fit. The coolers still hum, but the pitch is wrong, too high and sharp. The lights buzz overhead, but the frequency makes my teeth ache. Even my own footsteps sound different, echoing with a hollow quality that suggests the floor beneath me has become something other than solid linoleum. Aisle 1 passes without incident, though I notice the canned goods have rearranged themselves again. The green beans now form a perfect circle on their shelf, labels all facing outward, like they're protecting something in the center. But there's nothing in the middle except empty space, so I move on to aisle 2. Here, the cereal boxes stand at attention in military formation, their colorful cartoon mascots all turned to face the same direction, toward aisle 7. Tony the Tiger, the Lucky Charms leprechaun, and the Honey Nut Cheerios bee all stare down the store with their painted eyes, as if watching for something I can't see. In aisle 3, where my ghostly customer shopped for dish soap, the cleaning products have shifted into clusters. Bottles of Windex group with bottles of Pine Sol, while packages of sponges huddle together like frightened animals. The arrangement makes no commercial sense, but there's an organic quality to it, as though the products move themselves into positions that felt safe. Aisle 4. Pet supplies. The bags of dog food tower higher than before, stacked in precarious pyramids that shouldn't be able to support their own weight. But they stand firm, defying physics, with the same casual disregard for natural law that seems to permeate this entire building after midnight. Aisle 5. Paper products. Here, the toilet paper and paper towels have formed elaborate sculptures, twisted and woven together in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Not because they're frightening, but because my eyes can't quite process the geometry. The shapes seem to fold in on themselves, creating depth where none should exist. Aisle 6. Laundry supplies. Detergent bottles stand in perfect rows, but their contents have separated into layers of different colors, blue and white and green, swirled together like oil paintings left too long in the rain. The liquid moves slowly inside each container, responding to some current I can't identify. Then aisle 7. The voices start before I'm halfway down the health and beauty section. Not loud enough to make out words, but clearly human. A woman's voice mixed with what might be children, speaking in soft, urgent tones. They seem to be coming from somewhere among the shampoo bottles, though the exact location shifts as I listen. Rule 1 echoes in my memory. If you hear voices coming from the health and beauty section, do not investigate. Continue your rounds as normal. But the voices are so clear now, so desperate. The woman sounds like she's crying, pleading with someone I can't see. One of the children, a girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, keeps repeating something that sounds like, "Papa, please." The words tug at something deep in my chest, the same instinct that makes you want to help when you hear someone calling for assistance. I force myself to keep walking, flashlight beam trained on the floor instead of the shelves where the voices originate. My feet want to stop, want to investigate, want to help whoever is trapped among the bottles of Head & Shoulders and children's shampoo. But the rule is clear, and every other rule has kept me alive so far. The voices follow me as I walk. They don't fade with distance but remain constant, as though the speakers are moving alongside me just out of sight. The woman's sobs grow more urgent, and now I can make out some of her words. "The fire," she keeps saying. "Get the children out of the fire." My steps quicken despite my efforts to maintain normal pace. Behind me, the voices multiply. Now there are more children, their young voices joining the plea for help. But I don't turn around, don't look back, don't acknowledge their cries, even as they tear at my conscience. By the time I reach the end of aisle 7, sweat runs down my back despite the cool air. The voices continue for several more seconds, then fade gradually, like someone turning down a radio, until only silence remains. Aisles 8 through 12 pass in a blur of ordinary products arranged in extraordinary ways, but I barely notice the details anymore. My mind keeps replaying those desperate voices, the woman begging for help, the children calling for their father. Part of me knows I should have tried to help, even if it meant breaking the rules. Back at the counter, I collapse into my chair and check the time, 5:43 a.m. Less than an hour until Mrs. Beauregard arrives, assuming she keeps her usual schedule. The coffee tastes like ash in my mouth, but I drink it anyway, needing the caffeine to stay alert for whatever might happen in these final minutes. That's when the lights begin to dim. It starts subtly, just a slight reduction in the yellow glow that makes me think one of the bulbs might be burning out. But within seconds, the dimming spreads throughout the store like a slow wave, each fixture reducing its output until the entire space drops to about half its normal brightness. Rule 6 springs to mind immediately. If the lights begin dimming throughout the store, go to the break room immediately and wait. Do not come out until they return to full brightness. I grab my flashlight and hurry toward the back of the store where the employee break room sits behind its unmarked door. The dimming continues as I walk, shadows expanding between the aisles like ink spreading through water. My flashlight beam seems weaker than before, as though the growing darkness is actively fighting against artificial light. The break room door opens with a creak that sounds amplified in the dim store. Inside, I find a small space with a card table, 2 folding chairs, a microwave, and a mini refrigerator that hums quietly in the corner. A motivational poster on the wall shows a kitten hanging from a tree branch with the words, "Hang in there," printed below in cheerful letters. I close the door behind me and sit in one of the chairs, listening to the sounds filtering through the thin wall. The store's normal background noise continues, coolers humming, buildings settling, but underneath it all, something else moves through the aisles. Footsteps, maybe, but too many of them, overlapping in rhythms that suggest a crowd of people walking through merchandise displays. Through the door's small window, I can see the hallway that leads back to the main store. The lights out there have dimmed to almost nothing, leaving only deep shadows broken by occasional patches of weak illumination. Shapes move through those shadows, tall and short, quick and slow, but I can't make out any details from this distance. Time crawls while I wait in the break room. My watch shows 5:51, then 5:57, then 6:02. Each minute feels stretched thin, extended beyond its natural length by the weight of whatever is happening in the store beyond this door. The footsteps continue, sometimes coming close enough to the break room that I hold my breath, waiting for someone to test the door handle. At 6:08 a.m., the lights begin to brighten. The change happens gradually, the same slow wave that dimmed them flowing in reverse. Within 2 minutes, the yellow glow returns to its normal intensity, and the sounds of movement fade away until only the familiar background hum remains. I wait another 5 minutes before opening the door, just to be certain the rule has been fully satisfied. When I finally step back into the hallway, the store looks exactly as it did before. Ordinary merchandise on ordinary shelves under ordinary fluorescent lights. But walking back to the counter, I notice one final change. The receipt from the phantom purchase, which had been curled in the printer tray all night, now lies flat and smooth beside the register. Morning light filters through the front windows, weak but growing stronger, and I can finally read what the ghosts of Bull Street bought in their midnight transaction over a century ago. The receipt lies flat beside the register, its surface no longer curled, but smooth as pressed linen. Morning light filters through the front windows, weak sunbeams cutting through the Spanish moss outside to illuminate the faded ink that somehow survived the night. I pick up the paper with trembling fingers, finally allowed by Rule 2 to read what the ghosts purchased during their phantom transaction. Whitman's General Store, Bull Street, Savannah, March 15th, 1864. Purchase record: cornmeal, 20 pounds, 40 cents. Lamp oil, 3 gallons, 75 cents. Cotton fabric blue, 8 yards, $1.60. Molasses, 2 jars, 30 cents. Children's shoes, size small, 42 cents. Total, $3.47. Payment received, Confederate currency, plus silver customer. Mrs. Eleanor Whitman, clerk, J. Whitman. Below the transaction details, someone has written in different handwriting, the ink darker and more recent. They were preparing to flee when Sherman's forces arrived. Eleanor bought supplies for the journey north, shoes for little Margaret whose feet had outgrown her old ones. But they never left. The fire came too fast, spread too quickly through the dry goods. James tried to save them, but the roof collapsed before he could reach the back room where they were hiding. My hands shake as I read the additional note, recognizing the careful script as Mrs. Beauregard's handwriting. She's been documenting these phantom purchases, recording the stories behind each ghostly transaction. This receipt represents more than just a supernatural occurrence. It's evidence of a family's final moments, their last attempt to survive a war that would claim them anyway. The front door chime rings, and I look up to see Mrs. Beauregard entering with her usual morning thermos and paper bag. She moves slowly, her gray hair pinned back in the same style she's worn for the 23 years she's managed this store. Her eyes find the receipt in my hands, and she nods with satisfaction. "You read it," she says, setting her things on the counter. "Good boy. How was your night?" I set the receipt down carefully, treating it like the historical document it has become. All 6 rules came up, every single one. She raises an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. "That's unusual. Most nights only trigger 2 or 3. You must have made quite an impression on them." "Mrs. Beauregard, what happened to Jimmy Caldwell? The guard before me?" She pours coffee from her thermos into 2 paper cups, offering me one with steady hands. The liquid steams in the cool morning air, smelling of chicory and something sweeter that I can't identify. Jimmy tried to help them. Rule 1 specifically warns against investigating voices in the health and beauty section, but Jimmy heard Eleanor and the children crying for help. He couldn't resist. What happened when he investigated? He became part of their story. She sips her coffee, watching me over the rim of her cup. They were trying to escape the fire, you see. Eleanor, little Margaret, baby Samuel, and young Alice. When Jimmy went to help them, he got caught in their reality. He spent 3 hours reliving that night in 1864, trying to save a family that died over a century before he was born. The coffee tastes different from what she usually brings, richer, with undertones that remind me of molasses and old wood. But he survived. He quit and moved to Brunswick. His body survived. But part of Jimmy never left that burning store. He still wakes up some nights convinced he can smell smoke, still dreams about children calling for their papa, while flames spread through the walls. She sets down her cup and looks directly at me. "That's why the rules exist, Brandon. Not to be cruel, but to protect you from trying to fix tragedies that are already written in stone." I think about those desperate voices I heard, the woman pleading for help while her children cried for their father. Every instinct told me to investigate, to offer assistance, but the rule held me back. Mrs. Beauregard's smile reaches her eyes this time. "Good. Eleanor will be pleased. She doesn't trust easily, but she's taken a shine to you." She begins unlocking the registers and preparing the store for its daytime customers. I gather my flashlight and paperback novel, leaving the thermos she brought for the next guard. The receipt from last night's phantom purchase goes into a small wooden box behind the counter, joining what must be hundreds of similar records documenting transactions that occurred decades before I was born. Walking toward the exit, I pause near aisle 7. The health and beauty section looks ordinary in the morning light. Just rows of shampoo bottles and bars of soap, waiting for customers who won't see anything unusual about their arrangement. But I know that after midnight, this aisle becomes a doorway to March 15th, 1864, when a family prepared for a journey they would never complete. The door chime rings as I step outside into the humid Savannah morning. My Honda Accord sits in the parking lot exactly where I left it, covered in dew, but otherwise unchanged. The Spanish moss hangs still in the windless air, and somewhere in the distance, church bells chime 7 o'clock. I drive home through streets that are waking up to another ordinary day, past houses where people are starting coffee and checking phones and planning their normal lives. But tonight, when darkness returns to Bull Street, I'll be back to serve customers who have been dead for over a century, to follow rules that protect me from tragedies I could never prevent. Some jobs change you. This one reminds you that some stories never really end. At 7:02 a.m., everything happens at once. The register springs to life without warning, keys pressing themselves in rapid succession, while the screen flickers between modern displays and aged parchment. The phantom purchase from 2:30 a.m. had been orderly, predictable. This feels frantic, desperate, like someone racing against time that's already run out. The lights begin their slow dim throughout the store, triggering Rule 6 just as voices rise from aisle 7, Eleanor and the children pleading for help while flames roar in the background. The storage room door rattles with urgent knocking, and through it all, I can hear footsteps multiplying throughout the aisles, as if every ghost who ever died on this foundation has chosen this moment to walk among the living. I grab the paper with the rules, my hands slick with sweat as I try to prioritize. Rule 6 says, go to the break room when lights dim. Rule 1 says ignore voices from aisle 7. Rule 4 says, turn on the radio when storage room knocks. But how do I follow 3 rules simultaneously when they require me to be in different places? The radio. I can carry it with me. I snatch the old analog radio from behind the counter and twist the dial to AM 1450 as I hurry toward the back of the store. Static fills the air, but underneath the white noise I can hear something else. Whispered conversations in languages I don't recognize, and occasional fragments of English that sound like prayers or pleas for forgiveness. The break room door sticks when I try to open it, as though something on the other side is pushing back. I put my shoulder into it and force it open, stumbling inside just as the lights complete their dimming cycle. The small space feels cramped now, the walls pressing closer than they should in a room this size. Through the thin door, I can hear the Whitman family's final moments playing out in vivid detail. Eleanor's voice rises above the crackle of flames. James, where are you? The children. Margaret's small voice cuts through. Papa, the fire's getting closer. I can't see Samuel. And Alice, the middle child. Mama, I'm scared. Why won't Papa come get us? Each word hits me like a physical blow. I press my hands over my ears, but the voices penetrate anyway, carrying the weight of 160 years of unanswered calls for help. The radio in my lap continues its stream of static and whispered fragments, but now I can make out distinct phrases. Should have been faster. My thought they died. Failed them when they needed me most. James Whitman's voice, repeating his litany of guilt on an endless loop. The register out front continues its frantic transaction, the sound of keys clicking mixing with the growing roar of flames from aisle 7. Through the break room's small window, I can see shapes moving through the dimmed store. Tall figures and short ones, adults and children, all walking with purpose towards some destination I can't identify. At 7:08 a.m., someone knocks on the break room door. 3 soft raps, pause, then 3 more. But this isn't the urgent pounding from the storage room that triggered Rule 4. These knocks are gentle, polite, like a child asking permission to enter. Brandon? A small voice calls through the door. Female, maybe 8 years old. Brandon, we need your help. My stomach clenches. It's Margaret Whitman, the oldest daughter, the one Eleanor bought shoes for during the phantom purchase. The fire's spreading, she continues, her voice muffled by the door but clearly audible. Mama says you're strong enough to carry us all out. Samuel's so little and Alice is hurt. Please, Brandon. We don't want to burn anymore. I close my eyes and grip the radio tighter, focusing on the static rather than the heartbreaking plea. The rules don't specifically cover this scenario, a ghost child asking for help directly. But the principle remains clear. I cannot help them. I cannot save people who died 160 years ago. Papa tried to save us, but he wasn't fast enough. Margaret continues. He got out, but we didn't. Every night we wait for him to come back, to do better this time. But maybe he can't, because he's not alive anymore. Maybe we need someone who's still breathing. The knocking resumes, more insistent now. 3 raps, pause, 3 raps. Behind your voice, I can hear the other children. Samuel crying with the wordless distress of a baby, Alice calling for her mama. And underlying it all, the sound of wood burning, of a building consuming itself, while innocent lives wait for salvation that will never arrive. I know you can hear us, Margaret says, and now there's something different in her voice. Less childlike, more aware. We know about the rules, Brandon. We know you're not supposed to help us. But the rules were made by people who don't understand what it's like to burn forever. The temperature in the break room begins to rise, not the gradual warmth of changing weather, but the sudden heat of approaching flames. Smoke starts seeping under the door, carrying the scent of burning wood and something worse. Something that reminds me why the Whitman family has never been able to rest. Just open the door, Margaret pleads. Just look at us. That's all. You don't have to save us. Just see us. My hand moves toward the door handle without conscious direction. The metal feels hot against my palm. And for a moment, I can almost convince myself that opening the door would be the right thing to do. These children have been trapped in their final moments for 160 years. Don't they deserve at least to be acknowledged? But then I remember James Whitman's burned face, his confession about Jimmy Caldwell, and the desperation in his voice when he said, "He's part of our story now, doomed to replay that night whenever someone breaks Rule 1. I pull my hand back from the door handle. I can't, I whisper, loud enough for Margaret to hear. I'm sorry. I can't help you. The knocking stops abruptly. The voices fade. The temperature drops back to normal, and the smoke dissipates until only the faint scent of old camphor remains. Through the window, I watch the lights begin to brighten throughout the store, returning to their normal fluorescent glow. At 7:15 a.m., everything goes quiet. The register stops its frantic transaction. The voices from aisle 7 fade to nothing. The radio produces only clean static, without whispered fragments. Even the storage room door stops its rattling, leaving behind the silence so complete, it feels like the world holding its breath. I wait another 5 minutes before opening the break room door, just to be certain all the rules have been satisfied. When I step back into the hallway, the store looks exactly as it did hours ago. Ordinary merchandise under ordinary lights, waiting for ordinary customers who will never suspect the dramas that play out here between midnight and dawn. Walking back to the counter, I find 3 receipts in the printer tray instead of 1. The first shows the original phantom purchase from 2:30 a.m. The second lists items I don't recognize. Forgiveness, price unknown. Second chances, not available. Peace, out of stock. The third receipt is blank except for a single line at the bottom. Thank you for remembering us. The Whitman family. Outside, I hear the rumble of Mrs. Beauregard's old Buick pulling into the parking lot. Her headlights sweep across the front windows as she parks, and I can see her familiar silhouette gathering her thermos and paper bag from the passenger seat. The front door chime rings at exactly 7:30 a.m. as she enters, looking slightly frazzled, but otherwise normal. Car trouble, she says by way of explanation, setting her things on the counter. Battery died in my driveway. How did you manage on your own? I look at the 3 receipts, at the radio still tuned to AM 1450, at the store that has returned to its daytime mask of normalcy. I followed the rules. Mrs. Beauregard's smile reaches her eyes. Good boy. The hardest nights are often the most important ones. I still work the night shift at the Dollar General on Bull Street. Keisha moved in with me last month after I got that raise Mrs. Beauregard promised. $15 an hour now, enough for us to rent a small apartment in Ardsley Park. She asks sometimes about the burns that appear on my arms, the ones that show up after particularly active nights. I tell her they're from the old heating system, and she pretends to believe me. The Whitman family visits regularly now. Not every night, but often enough that I've learned their patterns. Eleanor still shops for supplies they'll never use. Always polite. Always grateful for proper service. The children rarely appear directly, but I hear them sometimes. Margaret humming lullabies in aisle 4. Alice counting inventory in her young voice. Baby Samuel's occasional giggles echoing from the candy section. James comes by weekly, usually on quiet Tuesday nights when the supernatural activity stays low. He doesn't try to walk through burning doorways anymore, at least not when I'm watching. Instead, he tells me stories about Savannah before the war, about neighbors helping neighbors prepare for uncertain times, about the weight of responsibility when people depend on you for survival. You did right that anniversary night, he told me recently, standing near the shampoo bottles that sometimes rearrange themselves into doorways to the past. Took strength to resist helping when every decent instinct told you otherwise. The rules have become second nature now. I check aisle 7 first during every walkthrough, whistling past the candy section, keeping the radio ready for storage room knocking. New guards don't last long. Mrs. Beauregard has hired 4 since me, and each one quit within 2 weeks. Something about not being able to handle the atmosphere, they say. Jimmy Caldwell still lives in Brunswick with his mother, but Mrs. Beauregard says he's doing better now that he's gotten some distance from Bull Street. Last week, a historian from the Savannah Historical Society came asking about the building's foundation, wanting to research the original Whitman's General Store for some anniversary article. Mrs. Beauregard gave him coffee and biscuits and told him our records only went back to when Dollar General opened in 1997. He left with a business card and promises to return with more specific questions about the site's commercial history. After he drove away, Mrs. Beauregard and I stood at the front windows, watching Spanish moss sway in the afternoon breeze. "Think you'll find anything useful?" I asked. "Probably not from official sources. The real stories live in places like this, passed down by people who work the late shifts and pay attention to details others miss." She patted my shoulder with maternal affection. "You've become quite good at keeping those stories alive, Brandon." The burns on my arms have started forming patterns now, small circles that look almost like fingertips, as though children have been grasping my sleeves during particularly intense nights. Keisha traced them yesterday morning while I pretended to sleep, her finger gentle against the marks that don't hurt but never fully fade. "You're keeping secrets," she whispered, thinking I couldn't hear. She's right, but some secrets protect the people you love. Keisha doesn't need to know that our apartment rental comes from wages paid by ghosts, or that her boyfriend spends his nights serving customers who died during the Civil War. She doesn't need to understand why I sometimes wake up smelling smoke, or why I've started keeping a flashlight beside our bed. Tonight, I'll return to Bull Street, unlock the brass key Mrs. Beauregard insists I use, and take my place behind that familiar counter. The Whitman family will continue their eternal preparation for a journey they'll never complete, and I'll help them remember that someone still cares about their story. Some jobs change you. This one teaches you that bearing witness to tragedy can be its own form of service, and that following rules isn't always about obedience. Sometimes it's about love.